Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 1990's Represent. We're still in our third cycle at 1993, talking about a movie on this episode. In this episode, we're talking about Last Action Hero with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Really fun movie. Watched it again recently, rented it on Amazon Prime. Had a really good time watching it. I haven't seen it in many years. I think I've only maybe seen it like once or twice prior to this. Like I want to say the last time I saw it was maybe like 14 years ago, maybe something like that. So it's been a while, but I had a lot of fun watching this movie. We have some notes here. We're gonna go through those notes, discuss like the plot and all that kind of stuff. So let me get our notebook open. There we go. So, Last Action Hero, first released June 18th, 1993. I was really excited about seeing this movie, and then kind of like reviews started coming out, and it didn't get very good reviews, so I ended up not seeing it, at least in theaters. I remember seeing it like a year or so later, or whenever it showed up on HBO. Don't remember exactly when that was. I think it was like 1994. Could have been late 1993, but didn't see it in theaters. Kind of regret not seeing it after this most recent kind of rewatch, because it's definitely a very good time at the movies. Had a lot of fun with it. The movie is insanely like over the top, very meta. Like you have two worlds in the movie. You have the real world, and then you have the movie world with Arnold Schwarzenegger playing Jack Slater, where like a bullet getting shot is like a flesh wound, things like that. So basically, it's all movie logic where like a building explodes and like nobody really gets hurt. Well, like Jack Slater totally is like survives it, but two police officers get blown up. The kid is watching the theater in the theater and kind of being like, oh yeah, that guy's a bad guy. That guy survives. This guy does whatever. But it's very meta, like very like satirical, very self-referential, very much I think ahead of its time. I think that's kind of why maybe it didn't do that well, or maybe it felt kind of weird at the time, because I can't really think of any movie, like, unless it was like a straight up like parody or a straight up satire like film that had kind of done what this movie was setting out to do. It like doesn't necessarily break the fourth wall because you don't really get referred to directly, but the kid in the movie is kind of talking, at least like in the theater, to himself about, he's like, oh yeah, like this thing is going to happen now, kind of thing. So it's kind of like maybe like a fourth wall break in a way, but it's just incredibly self-referential to like just like the action movie genre. Like I said, it's basically an entire satire of kind of the action film genre of like maybe like the 80s into like the early 90s. Like definitely there's like definitely a lot of kind of just like even references to like Die Hard and like just action films like that. It underperformed at the box office. It didn't do incredibly well. Wasn't well received initially. Um, it ends up, or has ended up, kind of becoming a cult classic. It's definitely a lot of fun. So it definitely kind of is. People have had kind of like a turnaround on it since its release, or streaming has really kind of like helped it out as well. There's just a huge. The cast is huge. The cameo list is huge. I'm actually just gonna pull that list up now and just read them off, because the cast is really good. The cameos are really good as well. So you have Arnold Schwarzenegger as Jack Slater. You also have Schwarzenegger playing himself later in the film. Austin O'Brien plays the kid. You have Charles Dance. I think this is the second film I've seen him in, because he was in Alien 3. He plays basically, he plays like a minion kind of at first, like a this Italian mobster's minion who ends up becoming kind of the villain once he realizes that he's in a movie and he can go to the real world and like do like havoc in the real world. You have Robert Prosky. He's like the projectionist that gives, I think the kid's name is Danny, the magic ticket. You have Tom Noonan. He plays Ripper. He also has cameos himself. Frank Frank McRae as Decker's just basically his supervisor. Basically, it's the kind of stereotypical police chief captain who's like, "You wrecked three squad cars this week. You're off the force." Like that kind of very much in that style. You have Anthony Quinn is as Vivaldi, kind of the main antagonist of the Jack Slater film, and he is working with Mr. Benedict, who's like a henchman at the time. But Vivaldi is basically the main villain of the Jack Slater like films. So because there's two worlds in the movie, there's the film world and then there's the real world. You have Brigitte Wilson as Whitney Slater, that's Jack Slater's daughter. F. Murray Abraham shows up as John Practice, who's a friend of Jack Slater. It's funny because you see him and you see Danny refer to him as the guy who killed Mozart because F. Murray Abraham is in Amadeus. You have Mercedes Rule as Danny's mom, Ingrid. You have Art Carney as Frank Slater, who's a cousin of Jack Slater, obviously famed comedian from the Honeymooners and all that kind of stuff. You have Professor Toru Tanaka, who's basically just a tough man who's basically Vivaldi's bodyguard. He's got like a brief scene. You have Ryan Todd as Andrew Slater. That's the son of Jack Slater. That's in I think Jack Slater 3. Because the premise of the movie is Danny is watching Jack Slater 3, and they're getting ready to premiere Jack Slater 4. And you have Bobby Brown as as Video Bobo, or Video Babe, I guess. And then the cameos are huge. So you have Frank Columbu, I think. You have Tina Turner as the mayor of Los Angeles. She has a couple scenes. You have Sharon Stone shows up, basically dressed as her character from Basic Instinct. Robert Patrick has a cameo as a T-1000. But leaving the police station, so I guess in movie world, T-1000 is an actual police officer. One thing I totally forgot was in this movie, and I just watched a movie with him earlier in the year, which we covered on the series, is Mike Muscat. He plays like a cop in this movie. He's like Slater, your ex-wife's on the phone. He plays one of the security guards in Terminator 2. He's the one I think who he walks out and the security guard is gone. He's like, Gibbons, you can't leave the desk like that. It's that guy. He's in this movie as well. Apparently, he was also Edward Furlong's acting coach in Terminator 2, which is really cool. You have let's see here, Sylvester Stallone, not in the film, but they go to a video store in the movie, and in movie world, Terminator 2. Sylvester Stallone plays the Terminator because they have like a Terminator 2 like cardboard cutout. It's got Stallone on it. Very funny kind of joke there. I think we got here Jack Slater. You have Wilson Phillips. You have Ian McKellen shows up as Death. I think this is probably the first thing I remember seeing him in before he became at least in my view became really popular with like the X-Men films and all that. You have Danny DeVito. He plays Whiskers, who's a cartoon cat. He does the voice of that. You have Colleen Camp, who is Whiskers. He just basically Whiskers basically harasses her. You have Joe Plowright as the English teacher. Just a huge list of cameos. Some of them, like the T-1000 cameo, was very brief. The Sharon Stone cameo, very brief. They're not hidden, I wouldn't say. But yeah, you definitely see the T-1000 walk out of a police station. You definitely see Sharon Stone's character from Basic Instinct walk out, wearing her jacket, and she's like smoking a cigarette. But a really good cast, really good use of cameos. Some of the cameos actually are characters in the Jack Slater film as well. So when they go to the premiere of Jack Slater 4 in the movie, Schwarzenegger is there as Schwarzenegger, but he's also there as Jack Slater. And the guy who plays, I think it was Tom Noonan, who plays Ripper, he shows up as Ripper because basically Benedict recruits him into his crime syndicate, so to speak. And the actor is also at the premiere, so he shows up twice basically. The film was directed by John McTiernan. I think famously, let me just make sure because I just want to make sure I'm getting this director correct. But yeah, so including films basically Predator and Die Hard. So it's basically the kind of stuff that this movie is kind of spoofing is definitely in his wheelhouse. So directed by John McTiernan, was written by Zach Penn and Adam Leff, and then they brought Shane Black and David Arnoff on to do the screenplay. it's kind of funny because I think when they set out to write the movie, they were trying to also have made reference to spoofing Shane Black films or something he had written because he's very famously created like the Lethal Weapon series. So like that, this kind of Jack Slater could be like a stand-in for like Riggs or Murtaugh or any of the kind of characters, or even like John McClane. So very much that kind of style. Carrie Fisher, famously from Star Wars, of course, came in and was a script doctor on this. She was actually pretty well known as fixing up a lot of scripts like during her career. The soundtrack to this movie is also insane. I think I have it on CD somewhere, but let me actually just bring up the soundtrack list. So the soundtrack's about like 54 minutes in length. It's got 12 tracks on it. Track one, you have Big Gun by AC/DC, so you're going right in with the kind of heavy rock, heavy metal right there. You have track two is What the Hell Have I? What the Hell Have I is by Alice in Chains. You have Angry Again by Megadeth. Real World by Queensryche. Two Steps Behind by Def Leppard. Poison My Eyes by Anthrax. You have Dream On, a live version of that by Aerosmith. A Little Bitter, another track by Alice in Chains. You have Cock the Hammer by Cypress Hill. You have Swim by Fishbone. You have Last Action Hero by Tesla, and then you have Jack the Ripper by Michael Kamen, I think. And that is basically, I think, also an ensemble featuring Buckethead, which is interesting. So very much a very heavy rock, heavy metal style soundtrack. It fits the film perfectly. It works really well. And this is kind of one of those soundtracks that came out at the time where soundtracks, I think, were still really a big thing. Like you would have, like they don't do soundtracks like this anymore necessarily usually unless it's like intentional. Like I don't want to say intentional, but like soundtracks nowadays, they don't really exist in the same kind of way that they existed in like the 80s and like mid and all the way through the 90s. There's a lot of just amazing soundtracks from that time period. This being one of them. But great soundtrack. Had a budget of $85 million and only grossed $137 million. So I don't think it quite made up the 2.5x multiplier. It still made money, but it definitely didn't make as much money as the studio had expected. I remember this thing being like really, really overhyped. I remember like seeing clips of it even as far back as like 1992 on like Entertainment Tonight or something like that. I used to watch that. And there's a clip, I think it's when they crash like a big truck into like, it looks like a museum, but you see it like kind of fall onto a statue, knock some stuff over. I remember seeing that clip on Entertainment like Tonight back in like I said, back in 1992 when they were discussing this film and kind of like like I won't say advertising it. I guess it was advertising it, but it was still like a year out at that time. Let's see here. There's a book called How They Built the Bomb, and I'm just gonna read this stuff off because this is. Let me actually just pull this up. Yeah, so basically, there's a book called How They Built the Bomb by Nancy Griffith. Of how basically um, how they book in the book Hit and Run, which also How They Built the Bomb is also the chapter in this book. How They Built the Bomb in the chapter in the book called Hit and Run, which describes kind of some stuff that like Sony had going on at the time. So apparently Universal moved Jurassic Park from to June 11th, and that was well after Sony had decided to make their release date June 18th. It was the first to have an advertisement placed on a space-going rocket, which I didn't know. Basically didn't do well because it had a huge wave of negative publicity after it was kind of like showed, like a rough cut was showed in May. And then Sony, it was basically had bad word of mouth at that like test screening, and that ended up kind of like seeping into the final product and making kind of like audiences kind of like be a little bit standoffish of going into it. It had a really rough editing and shooting schedule apparently. But basically, what else he said? The loss of the film was basically 26 million dollars, basically overall lost. And the film came out. I think it now has probably made money on like streaming and like people buying it digitally. And it was also the first film to release with Sony Dynamic Digital Sound, but the problem with that was there wasn't a lot of theaters that were actually equipped to handle that, or it would just like revert to like regular sound. So they had this really cool digital sound for it, but a lot of like most theaters weren't able to like actually utilize that sound system. See where now there's some really cool quotes from Schwarzenegger I want to bring up as well. And let me see here, box office. Let me see. Yeah, so Schwarzenegger was really not like pleased with how it went. Let me just see if I can pull this up. Yeah, so basically, there's a Netflix series called Arnold, which I guess was released last year. I haven't watched it. I might check it out. But he recalled, quote, how the movie like basically negatively affected him. And the quote is, quote, when Last Action Hero came out and I had reached my peak after Terminator 2, having the most successful movie of the year worldwide, I could not tell you how upset that I was about the negative Last Action Hero reviews. It hurts you. It hurts your feelings. It's embarrassing. I don't want to see anyone. I didn't want to see anyone for a week, but you keep plodding along. And then also James Cameron had mentioned, was also quoted as saying that he's never really heard him be that down. And he said he took it as a deep blow to his brand. I think it really shook him. But now Schwarzenegger's kind of had a turnaround on the movie, and like because it's gotten kind of like a resurgence in popularity now. So I think he looks on it as a one of his more underrated movies. So I definitely think it's underrated, or if you compare it to how it was rated when it initially came out. And now that's kind of that part of the video. We're going to get to the plot here. So plot of the movie basically is Danny likes to go to the movies. He likes skipping school to go to movies. He's going to see Jack Slater 3. He's probably seen it a bunch of times already because he's like got the movie like memorized. He's friends with the projectionist. Basically, projectionist says, "Hey, I'm gonna be screening the print of Jack Slater 4 at midnight tonight. You can come and watch it with me. It's gonna be like a private screening kind of thing. Like basically, like make sure the print is all good for when they do the premiere." So he goes home, gets in trouble with his mom for skipping school. She has to go to work, and like so she's like, "Don't leave the house." He tries to leave the house and gets robbed, or attempted to rob. The robber's like, "You don't have anything here, no jewelry or anything." He's like, so he goes to the police station, files a police report there, goes to the movie, and the gives him like this magic ticket. He's like, "I've had this ticket from Harry Houdini for like years, never was like," but he rips the ticket up, and it goes into the he's watching the movie, and basically eventually the magic in the ticket activates and it pulls him into the film. So it starts off with I think Vivaldi talking to um, Jack Slater's cousin, played by Art Carney. He's like, "Hey, like we're gonna like these two crime families are gonna join up, and I have this hitman over here, Benedict. He's got like these cool glass eyes. He's got like a smiley face on one, like a bullseye. I think one's like a cat's eye, but he's like, we're gonna team up and do this." And then he is in a car chase, and then Danny just magically pops up in the car, and there's like a huge car chase happens. Very kind of stereotypical like explosions, cars exploding, like crashing into stuff, all that kind of good stuff. They go to the police station, and Danny is basically trying to explain that it's movie world. He's like, no, we're in, like Jack Slater's like, no, we're in California, and he's like, well, we're all the average looking people because everybody looks just like amazing. He tries to prove it further by going to a video store, and they go in there, and he's like, "Oh, look, Terminator 2, like you're in this," and it's like it ends up being Stallone, like I said, really funny kind of joke there. But then Jack Slater has a daughter. They go to her house. They get rolled on by Benedict because Benedict is eventually figuring out that he is in a movie and he can go into another world because he actually has Danny's ticket, so he's able to get into the real world with that magic ticket. But they get attacked basically. Like that house, like Jack Slater's house gets blown up. Of course, it's like a movie explosion, so like Jack doesn't get injured because it's movie logic. It uses a lot of those kind of like getting shot is just a flesh wound in the thing. One really funny bit I forgot to mention earlier. Danny doesn't go to school at one point, like shows up late. Teacher's talking about Hamlet, and he basically is daydreaming of a version of Hamlet with Jack Slater. And it's one of just Schwarzenegger's like funniest bits. He's like, it's basically like what a Schwarzenegger version of Hamlet would look like, where he's just like shooting people and all that kind of stuff. He's like, to be or not to be. A thing blows up, and he's like, not to be. He's like smoking cigars and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, Benedict is eventually starting to figure out that he can get into the real world. He eventually does go into the real world and starts causing all kinds of chaos in the real world. And there, he's causing chaos at the film premiere of Jack Slater 4. So Schwarzenegger is there, a bunch of other celebrities are at that screening. Benedict is essentially trying to recruit other film villains. There's like a scene where he's like talking to Jack Slater. He's like, I can get King Kong in here, and he's like, you see him like circling like Jason and Freddy Krueger on like this like movie list. He's like, even like considering getting. He's like, I can get Dracula. I can get King Kong. There's a really clever like bit where he's firing a revolver. He's got this really cool like long barreled revolver, not long like Joker Batman style from 1989, but he shoots a bunch of times, and then he like fires and it clicks. It's empty, where you would think it's empty. As Schwarzenegger or Jack Slater is like, "Oh, did you make a mistake? Did you ran out of bullets?" And then Benedict actually shoots him. He's like, "No, I just left one chamber empty." Shoots him. I was like, "That's a really cool like subversion of that empty gun meme or something like that," where he's like, "I just left one unloaded intentionally so I can actually trick you into like thinking it was empty." So that's really cool. Jack Slater gets shot. Eventually, I think like Benedict gets like blown up or something like that. Of course, like good guys win, but they basically the way to save Jack Slater is they had to get him back into the movie world where his normal wound in the real world like was like a gut shot, which would probably kill him. They get him back to the movie world police station where they're like, all right, get him to surgery. This is just a flesh wound. He'll be fine. Um, and then basically shows like him like just like chilling at the movie theater, watching the movies and all that kind of stuff. Really, really fun movie. Like, definitely, I feel like it was kind of at the time it came out, it was like what you would call overhated. I think it was a lot of negative reviews. I definitely feel the movie was way ahead of its time. I think like if something like this were to come out now, it would just feel very natural. I think back then there were movies that were obviously parodies of stuff. Like you had Hot Shots, which is a parody of like Top Gun and things like that. But if the movie wasn't a straight up parody, like this is more satirical. It's not necessarily a parody of like other films. It's not like a Zucker Brothers thing or like the Naked Gun or anything like that. So I feel like audiences didn't really know how to react to it or how to or what to think of it. I think this like movie like this now, I think the reason it's actually becoming popular again is like this is kind of the perfect environment for these very self-referential satirical kind of films, especially like when you're spoofing or making a satire of an entire genre. It works well as an action film. I know there's like a lot of. I remember seeing on Entertainment. I think it was maybe Entertainment Tonight or something like back in the '90s. Maybe after this came out, people may have been discussing why it didn't work. And there's just so many like muzzle flashes. I think even the director was like, "Once you have so many muzzle flashes in a movie, people are going to start making fun of it." But I think like that was definitely like intentional because there's just scenes where you just see people like pointing guns and like shooting at the screen, and very much I think totally intentional because a lot of other action films that this movie is kind of satirizing absolutely do that. The Lethal Weapon movies do that. The Die Hard movies do that. So I think from that standpoint, I think the movie is actually a huge success as far as trying to be a kind of a self-referential parody or satire of that genre. Like I said, I hadn't watched this movie in a long time, but my most recent rewatch was I had a ton of fun with it. I would highly recommend checking it out, especially if you like action movies or if you like Schwarzenegger. Schwarzenegger, I think, was a like kind of like 91 to like 94 is like peak Schwarzenegger in my opinion. You have Terminator 2, you have this. I guess even 1990 because you had Total Recall. You then had Terminator 2. You had Last Action Hero, and just a ton of other stuff. You have like True Lies as well, and then I think like Eraser. I haven't seen Eraser. So like that one, I think it was still that was kind of like on the downswing. I think a little bit for like his career, but like definitely like 1990 to 1994 is absolutely like peak Schwarzenegger. Like you could choose, I guess, at any of those four movies, like Total Recall, Terminator 2, Last Action Hero, or True Lies, and have a great time with them. Two of those four movies being James Cameron films, by the way. But I think that is going to do it for this episode. We'll be back again in a few days doing a video or computer game of 1993. Then we'll be moving into 1994, doing our third cycle there and moving back through the rest of the decade. But again, that's going to do it for now. So thanks again for watching. Take care and have a good one. See ya.